common source of confusion when working with plasmid sequences is restriction enzyme cut sites versus protease cut sites. So restriction enzymes are enzymes that cut DNA at specific sequences. So they're site-specific endonucleases. And more specifically, they cut double-stranded DNA. Proteases cut proteins. And different proteases have different selectivities, and some of them are very selective, so that you can basically consider them site-specific. And so these would include things like TEV, HRV3C, persistent protease, thrombin. These all recognize specific sequences, and that's going to allow us to do things like, say, cut off a tag from a protein, such as the tag that we use for purification, such as a his tag. So when we're doing recombinant protein expression, so say we're getting bacteria to make a protein for us, we're giving them the instructions for making it. And so when we give them the instructions, we can put an extra bit of DNA on the end of the DNA that has the instructions for making our protein. Now we have something that's going to encode, say, a his tag. So we now have the string of histidine residues on the end of our protein. And we could use that to help us purify it. But then once we've done that, we might want to cut off that tag because we don't need it anymore. And so the way that we can do this is by engineering there to be a protease recognition site in between the tag and the protein. But that protease recognition site is in the protein that gets made. It's not in the DNA itself. Even though it'll be annotated in the plasmid map, it'll be labeled as a cleavage site. And it might even show you where it would cleave. But there's also going to be annotated, typically, restriction enzyme cut sites. And those are where the DNA is getting cut. So those are going to be things like your NOT1, your EcoR1, your BAMH1, those sorts of things. Those are restriction enzyme cut sites, and those are the DNA being cut. And so that could be good for things like molecular cloning, as well as seeing if your cloning worked. But those are cutting the DNA, not cutting the protein. So the restriction enzymes cut the DNA, the proteases cut the protein, and you can have site-specific proteases that cut site-specific sites on the protein, but you also have proteases that are not very specific, and you also have nucleases that aren't very specific. But in these cases, we have these specific things that are cutting at specific sites that are often labeled on your plasmid map, but they're cutting at different levels. Just like the protein sequence that you see is going to be the sequence that comes from the DNA, but we can change the DNA in order to change the protein.